Kenyatta amesikia, Odinga amesikia, ipo
Yes.
Tupunguze mzigo ama hapana mheshimiwa? Where have we reached? I saw Siaya, Homa Bay have rejected. Murang'a, what is?
Yes, I think it was...
Mizigo.
Yes. Siaya, which is my county of extraction, was the first to reject. And then I think it was Nyeri, was it Nyeri? Kirinyaga, and then Murang'a. I have said on this show before that Punguza Mizigo is ill-conceived and ought to be rejected on merit. And I saw subsequently, my friend Dr. Kure came here and has always been calling a lot of us names and all that. It's not about name calling, it is about merit. And I've explained, and wherever I go, I explain why we should reject Punguza Mizigo, not because it's initiated by Dr. Kure, but because on its face, it is in fact, if that thing was to pass, this document we call the Constitution will be the most chaotic thing you ever saw. Because it is not even in consonance with the provisions of the Constitution.
For example, Monsieur.
Now, for example, one, I saw Ekuru Aukot say in your show, and he's been telling people, that Punguza Mizigo is going to solve the question of representation, 50-50 for women. Punguza Mizigo makes provision for 1 woman and 1 man for election in the National Assembly. In the Senate, it removes the provisions for nominated senators. It does not make an alternative provision. How will you achieve the 50-50 in the Senate? How will it achieve representation when right now elected senators who are women, I think, are barely 3? They're very few. It does not. 2, it says that it's making the Senate the upper house and the National Assembly the lower house. And it purports to do that by saying the Senate shall be the upper house. You don't make a house an upper house by declaring it so. You make a house an upper house by giving it the powers that are superior to the other one. Right now, under the Constitution, the National Assembly makes law. Senate participates in lawmaking. It makes the National Assembly the upper house factually. If you want to change that, then you take the powers in the National Assembly and give them to the Senate. So those are just 2 examples. I can give you 20 reasons why it is illegitimate, and it makes claims that are unfounded in law and fact. So it has to be rejected. And I therefore, I allowed the counties that have so far rejected it.
I was also asking, in terms of him failing in counties, how many has he covered? What is the percentage of his success or failure? Because people say what he has failed. Has he succeeded? What has left?
To the best of my knowledge, there's no county that has adopted it. I think there have been fora where Dr. Kuru has spoken to MCAs in what you would call a Kamukunji, and I think there are 1 or 2, especially I think around the Rift Valley, 1 or 2 that said they will support it. But so far, to the best of my knowledge, there's none that has endorsed it.
So what does the law provide, Daktari, in terms of the period he has to cover?
The law gives 3 months, 90 days, within which a county must accept or reject. And so there are 2 alternatives. A county can consider it and endorse it, and then signify to the speakers, or reject it. Alternatively, if that period expires before any particular county has considered it, then by default, they've rejected it. So that is the process.
Mheshimiwa, I wanted to talk to you about budgeting and the issue of money laundering. Because as the president was talking about the dam today and the stealing of the dams, it's always clear to me that tenderers conspire with people international to rob the Kenyan people. Do we have proper laws to find out wale watu wanaiba mali yetu huko nje? And do we have mechanisms to be able to reach them?
You know, grand corruption in this country happens in 3 ways and at 3 stages. And Kimarer and Aror is just an example. You saw in that report, as they were saying, that the Kimwarer, they did not even do a feasibility study. That the last one that was done was 28 years ago. So how would you budget for something for which no feasibility has been done, and then go ahead and allocate money, and not just allocate money, release that money before even there are any designs, and that money then is released to persons who are not even in this country? The grand corruption happens first in terms of budgeting. And in this country, if you think of any grand corruption, Kimwarer and Aror included, whether it's Gulana, Kulalo, and all those others, some people sit down somewhere and then put it in the budget policy statement. That budget policy statement, when it comes to Parliament, it is with the connivance of some people in Parliament, especially the budget committee, because they are supposed to interrogate all those things. It's not interrogated, and then Parliament endorses that budget. So every grand corruption is planned and budgeted. And the second stage, once they've planned and budgeted it, then they avoid the procurement. They go through what they call single sourcing, or sometimes something called government to government. This animal called government to government is the single most biggest avenue for grand corruption.
Chinese, Japanese say, if you want our money, you must give me SGR.
Yes.
If the Japanese, you want our road, you must give it to our people. Government.
Then that comes to the third stage. The third stage then is that it is given to a predetermined company. And usually it's financed by a loan. Most of those loans then insist that the company to do it must be from that country. So it is a syndicate where it is budgeted, it is allocated, it is given to a predetermined company, the money is sent to that company, and then when you want to hold them accountable, you find you have nothing. Did you know, for example, Tony,
you did a case once for a Japanese company. I know.
Yes,
it was established.
Yes, and I'm going to tell you that. But let me tell you something more interesting. You know the fiasco of the Mofo that mishandled our last election. When we were looking at the process, under the Public Accounts Committee, we even invited their directors. Do you know, for a long time, we could not serve them. Then they just happened. And when they came to us, we discovered, one, that they are not even a registered company in this country. You know, in this, under Kenyan law, you can only be a natural person or a legal person. So if you are not a legal person, then it means you are contracting with a ghost. They are not registered in this country. They do not have a registered office. They do not even have an address of service. So when you want to hold them accountable, even like the Italian company for Aurora and Kemorer, then suddenly you find it's in a foreign country, you have no one to go to. Now, the biggest scandal sometimes with these loans is that they encourage you that you build this dam. It will cost you 1 billion shillings. We will give you that 1 billion shillings. But you must give us the company from our country that builds that dam. And most times, you find that they've been given that 1 billion. In no time, they've done 20% of the work, but they claim they are owed 3 billion. And that has happened.
That
in
concept,
fact, let me tell you.
It's called steal and distribute.
Yes.
Hila iko tamu, ni steal and distribute. Sasa ya kugawana, ili wazee wapate.
I was once involved in an international arbitration.
Yes.
And let me tell you, I thank the current MD of Kengen. That lady was then the company secretary. Kengen was given money by a country which I will not mention for now to build the Sondu Miriu project, given about 5 billion. The insistence was that it has to be given to a company from that country. In no time, that company had done about 40% of the work, had been paid the entire 5 million, but it was claiming 7.5 billion, more than the entire amount that was given for the entire project. If it were not for the seriousness of some of the officers in Kengen then, and the seriousness they took the arbitration, and we did it here, we did it in London, we did it in Geneva, and we defeated the claim, many times. That is how corruption happens. They sue, and then those representing government, they concede to that, and that money goes and is shared.
Whether it is Goldenberg or Agro Leasing or the dams or the company you represented in energy, the pattern is the same. You work here, then you have a formula to steal and distribute. To what extent are foreign governments responsible? They come here and give us talk about corruption. They hold meetings with the president everywhere we travel, and they come and they say, we are giving you grant, etc. Lakini pesa inaibiwa inaenda kwa hizo mainchi. What do we do? How do Kenyans get
My view of it is that there are many governments that are concerned with corruption within their country, but totally unconcerned with corruption in foreign lands. In fact, they facilitate it. Many countries, China, for example, has very strict laws in terms of corruption within China, and they do not tolerate even the smallest aspect of corruption. But you'll be surprised to note that they do not have law regarding corruption that is perpetrated in foreign lands. And that is why you will find that there are Chinese companies which cannot even imagine they can be corrupt in their country. But time and again, you keep hearing of Chinese company involved in this and that kind of corruption. And there are many other countries like that. I think one of the things that we should speak to very strongly, all the lectures that the ambassadors give us about corruption and all, they should start by doing two things. One, they should start by confirming to us. Any ambassador from especially some of the Western countries can only speak to us about corruption if they can tell us that their home countries has established that there's no Kenyan who has touched money in that country, because there are many. You should start, repatriate all the money back to Kenya. Then we can deal with it. And two, they should only speak to us about corruption if they can help us get out of this thing that they give us money, but we give that money back to their country through those companies which then involved in corruption. Otherwise, it's all perpetration of corruption. We are in deep well and we are just digging deeper.
What can Parliament do? What can our laws do as well to make it better?
I think Parliament has done quite a bit, but it should do more, and I've been urging Parliament to do more. First of all, the avenues of corruption through government to government or direct procurement should all go. All procurement should be public and it should follow the process. Secondly, I think Parliament must be more involved than it has been before in terms of borrowing. You know, the law requires that when the government borrows, it should make those disclosures. So far, it has not been making those disclosures. We used to make noise as the ODM MPs, but we are always the minority, even when government was borrowing. But I think we should realize that as Parliament, we are supposed to check the executive, not from which party we are. So if we can control borrowing, if we can reduce those avenues of direct procurement, government to government, and thirdly, if we can take charge and impeach one or two ministers who are involved in corruption deals without waiting for them to be charged and convicted, I think we'll have gone a long way. Parliament is only lately starting to work as Parliament. I think until the handshake, it was all about the majority and the minority. Post the handshake, many members of Parliament are now starting to act as parliamentarians. And I think it's the proper time to now also take
How can
charge.
we use the finance bill better? Money laundering laws, Mudenike money. How can we get asset recovery to work better abroad?
I think that the Asset Recovery Agency has tried, but it can still do more. It can do more within the country and outside the country. All these guys who are involved in grand corruption, they will never keep that money in the banks. Sometimes they keep it in the banks. But you can always trace where it is. Some of it, like this Kimarwer Aror Dam scandal, it is clear that the money that was paid found its way back to the country. Some of it may not have come back to the country, but it would have been invested somewhere in somebody's name. I think the day they decide that however high you are, even if it is the president, even if it's the deputy president, even if it's a minister, even if it's a judge or an MP, that you will be named, you will be shamed, and whatever you acquired will be retrieved, then that is the day we will start reducing. I think also that although the president has been speaking passionately about corruption, there's one area where in his speech, in his State of the Nation address, he said to us in Parliament that he cannot act against those who are perceived to be corrupt in his government. He will allow them to be charged, and only once they are charged, then he can act. The law does not require that. You know, the president gets a lot of intelligence, and the president knows who is corrupt and who's not corrupt in his government. Fortunately, ministers, PSs, you do not need any of them to be charged for you to remove them. My suggestion has always been that where the president has that kind of evidence, he should act and remove those people and let criminal law take its course separately rather than let them stay there and await instructions. This Kimwarer, now that the president has received the report, I think the president should now act. All those who received the money, if they're in government, they should be removed and then charged. I don't think we should wait, for the DP